Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our hadith class. We are doing the kitab known as Riyaadhus Saaliheen of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, and we are still busy with the chapter of Kathratu Turuqil Khair, the chapter dealing with the topic of there being many good avenues of good deeds. We had completed 11 ahadith in this chapter, so we are continuing on from the 12th hadith of this chapter tonight, inshallah. So let us begin. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we're reading hadith number 128 of the kitab, the 12th hadith of the chapter, الثاني عشر عنه رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من توضأ فأحسن الوضوء ثم أتى الجمعة فاستمع وأنصت غفر له ما بينه وبين الجمعة وزيادة 3 أيام ومن مس الحصى فقد لغى. رواه Muslim. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Man tawadda'a fa ahsan al-wudu. Now, as you know, this chapter is about doing little deeds that are deemed as being minute in our eyes, but is great in the court of Allah. So the hadith begins out, Man tawadda'a fa ahsan al-wudu. A person who makes wudu and he makes his wudu properly, perfectly. ثم أتى الجمعة. Then he comes to Jumu'ah. Now obviously I'm not delving too deeply into what I mean by perfectly. Perfectly means, for example, to perform your wudu with all of the sunan, all of the nawafil, no wastage of water, and etc., you know, things of that sort. So that is called a proper wudu. Then ثم أتى الجمعة. So you understand that this hadith is referring to specifically on a Friday, for the specific reward that we are dealing with. So ثم أتى الجمعة. Then he comes to the masjid for the Jumu'ah Salah. فاستمع وأنصت. He listens and he pays and he keeps silent while he listens to the khutbah. Now, in modern days today, especially in the Western countries, in South Africa, in India, Pakistan, and places like this here, because of the fact that majority of people don't know Arabic, so therefore you will find that there'll be an English talk, there'll be an Urdu talk, there'll be a Gujarati talk, Afrikaans talk, whatever the case may be, according to the particular masjid. That does not form part of the khutbah. The khutbah is when the imam gets onto the mimbar and he starts now, and the khutbah is only in Arabic. Khutbah is not in Urdu, khutbah is not in English, only Arabic. That is the khutbah. So then he listens attentively and he keeps silent. He don't do his own thing. He pays attention to. Now here's the thing, a lot of time people, you find people saying, I don't understand Arabic, so it's like, how does it apply to me? The reality is that Allah told us that when the Quran is being recited, then keep silent and listen to it attentively. Despite the fact that you don't understand the Quran, that doesn't change the fact that you have to listen and pay attention. So even though you don't understand what the topic or anything of the khutbah is, because you don't know 2 words of Arabic, that does not change the fact that you are still required by the Sharia to keep silent and to listen attentively. Then what happens when you do all of this? غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْجُمُعَةِ. Then Allah forgives him between that Friday and the next Friday. But وَزِيَادَةُ 3 أَيَّامٍ. And Allah adds extra 3 days by. In other words, if you make a proper wudu on the day of Jumu'ah and you head off to the masjid and you listen attentively and you keep silent, then Allah forgives you for 10 days. It reaches 7 days to the next Friday and then Allah adds another 3 by. So for 10 whole days, Allah forgives you. وَمَنْ مَسَّ الْحَصَى فَقَدْ لَغَى. Now this comes back to your situation in the masjid itself. While you are, now what is فَاسْتَمَعَ وَأَنْصَتَ? This final portion of the hadith adds a rider on to فَاسْتَمَعَ وَأَنْصَتَ. وَمَنْ مَسَّ الْحَصَى. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, whoever touches stones, فَقَدْ لَغَى, then he has engaged in futility. Now this part of the hadith is explaining فَاسْتَمَعَ وَأَنْصَتَ, that in order for you to listen and pay attention, your attention must not be drawn away from anything, no matter how minuscule it is. Now, understand in the context, the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't have fancy carpets. It had normal sandy ground. So when you were performing salah on the sand, there would be little type stones like this. Yes, sometimes a little bigger stone. Now your attention is drawn away, and you brushing the sand where you're going to be making sajda now, for example, or minuscule unimportant things like that. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if you do even that much, faqad lagha, then you have engaged in futility. What's the result of engaging in futility? The result of engaging in futility is that you lose the full reward that you should have gotten. So therefore, فَاسْتَمَعَ وَأَنصَتَ, that is the main rider. You pay absolute attention. Now, what the fuqaha have also added on is you will face the direction of the imam. You will look towards him, you will keep silent, and you will listen to what he is saying. So if your attention is on the imam over there as he is reciting the khutbah out, then you won't be distracted by all things around you. And your attention should be such that even if other things are happening around you, your attention should not sway from that. So now you'll find it's a sad case in today's world. People have their cell phones and they can't put their cell phones on silent. And then you have people and they come with musical tones on top of it too. Now the phone rings in the masjid and there's a song playing over there. And people are like, hey, what's going on there? Now tell that man. All things like this all falls into the category of, if you are not responsible, you in the front, the man is in the back, what you got, you're never going to reach him. The person next to him is going to already try to get his phone out to stop it if he's performing salah or whatever the case may be. So the point being that your attention should be on what is your responsibility. Your responsibility, listen and pay attention to the khutbah, not to listen and hear what ringtone the next man has got. So that fastama'a wa ansata. When you do that, then you get the full reward. But otherwise, if not, and you are going to be, let's put it this way, how to put it? If you're going to be worrying about everything that's going on around you instead of focusing your mind purely on the khutbah, then in that case, faqad lagha, in that case, you would have been engaging in futility. All right, anyway, so that was the first hadith, Rawahu Muslim. Imam Muslim rahimahullah is the narrator of that hadith. Let's move on to the next one. حديث number 129 الثالثة عشرة عنه رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا توضأ العبد المسلم أو المؤمن فغسل وجهه خرج من وجهه كل خطيئة نظر إليها بعينه. Lengthy hadith, so let's do it in portions. So the first portion of the hadith, this hadith is also reported by Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, إذا توضأ العبد المؤمن أو المؤمن مسلم أو المؤمن, that when the believing slave, either a Muslim or a mu'min. Now I'm not going to get at least take too much time speaking on this point. There is 3 levels for a Muslim. There's Muslim, mu'min, muhsin. Muhsin is the highest level, Muslim is the lowest level. So here lowest don't mean it's bad. Lowest means at the very least you're going to enter into Jannah in the first place. But in order to understand what is Muslim, Mu'min and Muhsin, instead of me explaining the whole thing, you are welcome to go to the YouTube channel, the Darul YouTube channel, go to the playlist Riyaadhus Saaliheen and play the first class, which would be on Hadith Jibreel, and or at least the Hadith of Jibreel, the one that's known as Hadith Jibreel, and that will explain the Muslim, Mu'min and Muhsin in sufficient detail over there. So we're not going to take too much time by going over it and over it again. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, whether you are a Muslim or you are a Mu'min, you find yourself in this situation where you are making wudu, then فَغَسَلَ وَجْهَهُ. Now in your wudu, we're talking specifically the following postures, the faraid of wudu, so to speak. So when he washes his face, خرج من وجهه كل خطيئة نظر إليها بعينه. Then as he washes his face, all of the sins that took place, all of the sins that he looked at, it falls out of his eyes. مع الماء أو مع آخر قطر الماء. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that this is a doubt from the Rawi. Which statement did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam make? Meaning, did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said نظر إليها بعينه مع الماء or نظر إليها بعينه مع آخر قطر الماء? That's where the doubt comes in. The meaning is very similar. مع الماء means with the water. Or مع آخر قطر الماء means with the last drop of water. In other words, to simplify the translation over here, what it means is that when the person now washes his face in his wudu, then down to the last drop of water that falls off from your face, your sins are falling literally in those drops. Now, it's coincidental, not that anything's ever coincidental, but in our fiqh class just the other day, we spoke about the fact that ma'ul musta'mal, used water, is regarded as being pure. And one of the hadith we touched on was none other than this very hadith, that the sins fall off in that water. So despite this, the water being water which contains your sins, the water does not become an impurity. But anyway, that's for the fiqh class. For the focusing, the purpose that we're focusing on here is that the wudu that you are going to be performing, one way or the other, you have to make your wudu if you want to make your salah. You have to make wudu if you want to touch the Quran, and so on and so forth. But yet, the deeds that we take for granted as being so minuscule, but yet Allah has put such rewards in it, that same wudu that you are going to be performing, Allah uses, and this applies whether you are a male or a female. When you make your wudu, you wash your face. The sins that you had committed with your face by looking at the wrong things. Okay, I'll add it in this context here. It would apply in the case of a woman if she's applying the wrong type of stuff to her face and going out there in front of ghair maharim. The point being, sins committed with your face. What happens when you wash your face? As each drop falls off from your face, your sins fall off with those drops too. فإذا غسل يديه خرج من يديه كل خطيئة كان بطشتها يداه مع الماء أو مع آخر قطر الماء. Same thing Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says. When he now washes his hands, then every sin that he had caused with his hands, that he had touched with his hands. So this would be either you touched a ghair mahram, you touched some woman, or you, for example, you hit somebody. So whether it be touching in the wrong way, or it be hitting or abusing somebody in that manner, both ways it is a sin. So as you for example, wash your hands in your wudu, which means up until your elbows, then as each drop falls off from your hands, the sins fall off with each and every single drop down until the last drop. It doesn't mean 2-3 drops fall off there, it means literally if 40 drops drop off, your sins fall off with it all. Now, I must add one additional point over here. We spoke about ahsan al-wudu in the previous hadith, and I mentioned performing your wudu properly without wastage of water. So you cannot think that, well, you know what, if sins fall off with every drop, then why don't they throw a whole bucket over me, because that would be much more water, so that would mean more sins fall off. But that would not be correct, because that would now incur the sin of wastage of water, because it's unnecessary to use that amount of water. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us against the wastage of water, so this would not bring you more rewards. Rather, like I say, it would add onto your scale of wastage of water rather than it being some sort of benefit for you. So you use the amount that is required to wash your arms, or to wash your face, to wash your feet, etc., not more than that. Coming back, so all the sins right up until the last drop of water, all your sins that you had committed with your hands, it falls off with it. فإذا غسل رجليه. Now when you wash your feet, خرجت كل خطيئة مشتها رجلاه مع الماء أو مع آخر قطر الماء حتى يخرج نقيا من الذنوب. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said when he washes his feet, then every sin that he committed with his feet by walking towards that particular sin, the sins fall off with every drop that falls off from his feet, right up until the last drop of water that falls off him. All of his sins keep on falling in that manner. حتى يخرج, until he exits, meaning until he completes that wudu in what state? نقيا من الذنوب, free from sin. So time and again Allah looks for excuses to forgive us. We commit sin, we haven't even repented, but yet Allah makes it that for something that we plan on doing, that we have to do, that is a necessity for our daily life to perform our wudu, but yet despite it being a necessity, despite it being something that we have to do, Allah has still attached such great reward for it, that Allah rewards us for something that we are required to do. It's not an optional thing that we are doing. We don't have a choice in the matter. You have to make salah, so you have to make wudu. So, it's not like tahajjud, for example. If you don't make tahajjud, you're not sinful. But if you don't make wudu, you are definitely sinful, because you can't perform your salah without it. So, little things that we overlook, but yet Allah attaches great amount of rewards to it, if only we understand and take benefit from it. So Imam Muslim, Rawahu Muslim, Imam Muslim rahimahullah is the narrator of this hadith as well. Let's move on to do one more hadith, hadith number 130, الرابع عشرة, عنه رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الصلوات الخمس والجمعة إلى الجمعة ورمضان إلى رمضان مكفرات لما بينهن إذا اجتنبت الكبائر. رواه مسلم. You notice all of these hadith anhu it begins, because it's also from him, meaning all from Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu. So Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu narrates the 14th hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who said that as-salawatul khamsu, the 5 daily salah, wal jumu'atu ila al-jumu'ah, and one jumu'ah to the next, wa ramadanu ila ramadan, and one ramadan to the next, mukaffaratun lima baynahunna, they are things that cause your sins to be forgiven, إِذَا اجْتُنِبَتِ الْكَبَائِرِ, if you abstain from the major sins. So, you carry on with your daily life, you may end up making sins, minor sins, in reality, from a practical perspective, we should not be looking at the smallness of sins, but we should look at the greatness of the one that we are sinning against. So, from the point here is that we're talking specifically kabair in the context of the Sharia, that you haven't engaged in theft, you haven't engaged in zina, you haven't engaged in murder, things of that sort. So if you have abstained from the kabair, then all of these things are a means of your sins being forgiven. Mukaffaratun lima baynahuma. Now, lima baynahunna. Now you see here, as-salawatul khamsu, 5 daily salah. So in other words, there's hourly, a couple of hours between Dhuhr and Asr, between Asr and Maghrib and Isha and Fajr. They on the backs of one another. Then Jumu'ah to Jumu'ah means a week between the two. Ramadan to Ramadan is a year between the two. But what it shows is that if you are performing every day your 5 daily salah, if you perform every week your Jumu'ah, if you fast and do your ibadah every Ramadan, then you remain in a good position in the sight of Allah, that Allah will always be wiping out your minor sins on account of it. Doing the stuff that you have to do. You have to fast in Ramadan. You have to perform Jumu'ah. You have to perform your 5 daily salah. But despite that, Allah still gives you all of these extra perks for doing the things that you are required and obligated to do nonetheless. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah is the narrator of that hadith. Let's move on to the next one. Al-Khamisa Ashara, 131st hadith, 15th hadith of the chapter. عنه رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ألا أدلكم على ما يمحو الله به الخطايا ويرفع به الدرجات. قالوا بلى يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال إسباغ الوضوء على المكاره وكثرة الخطى إلى المساجد وانتظار الصلاة بعد الصلاة فذلكم الرباط. Rawahu Muslim. Hadrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu once again reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, should I not point out such things to you by which Allah yamhu Allahu bihi al-khataya, that Allah erases your sins on account of it, wa yarfa'u bihi darajat, and Allah raises your ranks on account of it. قالوا بلى يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they were extremely interested, and they said, definitely tell us, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam went on to explain what are these some of these things. Isbaghul wudu'i ala al-makarih means making wudu despite there being some difficulties involved. Now, this people tend to understand this in a context in if you happen to live in a country where you don't exactly have a lot of water, or you live in a country where you have cold water, where maybe, for example, you have to melt some snow, or even in our context, maybe you're not opening, you don't have an instant hot water type geyser type thing. So you open your tap to make wudu, and the initial water which comes out is cold until the geyser can now make the water hot. So you don't waste water till the water turn hot. You use that same cold water. I'll add a pointer on here, is that if you are going to get sick from the cold water, then the Sharia does not require you to use that cold water. You can then wait, save the cold water and put it aside and use the hot water to make your wudu. So, everything should be put in its correct perspective. So you don't think, I've got the flu, it's in the middle of winter, I'm half dead, but no, I must use ice water. No, that's not correct. So it's speaking about when there's a bit of difficulty involved. Sometimes you have, let's put it this way, you got a cut. So you've got a plaster on. Now you feel, you know what? I don't feel like taking my plaster off. Maybe my wound may bleed again. Even though in reality, it's not that likely. But now you like, maybe I can just wipe over and things like this. So there's some difficulty. Or maybe the plaster is difficult to remove. Now you don't want to go through all of that difficulty. But it shows that when you make your wudu properly, and you undergo a little bit of difficulty, it is a means of Allah removing your sin and raising your ranks. You think nothing of it. You look upon it as being a difficulty you're going through. In reality, it is a means of Allah both removing your sin and raising your rank. So it's a win-win-win situation for you at the end of the day. So that's the first one. وَكَثْرَةُ الْخُطَى إِلَى الْمَسَاجِدِ, taking a lot of steps to the masjid. Now, this is let's put it this way, a tasalli from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to show that if you happen to be a person and you live far away from the masjid, but you make the effort to walk to the masjid. Now, the hadith primarily speaks about walking, but in today's world, not everybody can necessarily walk to the masjid, but you get in your car and you drive to the masjid, and it's a distance to drive. Then for every step that you would take, or every revolution of the wheels of your car that you make to reach that masjid, your reward, your sins are removed and your ranks are raised by you doing this. So some, people, we like to live close to the masjid, so that, you can roll out of your bed and you basically at the masjid door. It helps, definitely, because you're never going to miss salah in jama'ah in the masjid. But what it also, why Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us certain things like this, is to also let those people who live far away, because not everybody can afford to live right next to the masjid. So for those who live far away, it gives them something to look forward to. That for the difficulty, the petrol that I would use, the time that I would take to walk from my house, to ride from my house, to reach that distance to get to the masjid, Allah will reward me for every step that I take, for every drop of petrol that I use, for every drop of oil that goes in your car, for the wear and tear on your tires, everything. Allah will reward you for that, if only we understood it. So the kathratul khuta ila al-masajid, you get reward from living next to the masjid and coming to the masjid, but you get the reward of that 1,000 steps and that 2 kilometers worth of drive if you are traveling from a distance, which the man who lives next door to the masjid would not get. You get the reward of attending the salah in the masjid, no question about it. But this reward of kathratul khuta ila al-masajid, you don't get that. Unless, of course, he happens to be out one day and he decides to walk or ride a long distance to get back to the masjid. That's a different story. But you're living next to the masjid, Fajr time, Adhan goes off, you get up, you walk out of your door, you're at the masjid door. You will get your reward for those few steps that you have taken. But obviously, think of it as being one reward per step. If you take 5 steps to the masjid and the next man takes 5,000 steps because of the distance he has to travel, then obviously you can expect that he has 4,995 more rewards than you, who just had to take that 5 steps to the masjid. any case, in the last part of the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَانْتِظَارُ الصَّلَاةِ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ, and waiting for the next salah after the one salah has ended. So you would find that, for example, Sahaba radiallahu anhum, ulama, ai they would have this habit that, for example, depending on your time, depending on your situation, in our world today, this is most common between Asr and Maghrib, Maghrib and Isha, most common. So a person would sit, for example, in the masjid. You've performed your Asr Salah finish, then you sit, if you're in the masjid, and you recite Quran or whatever, or you make some dhikr while you're sitting there, waiting for the next Salah to begin. So as long as you, and then another hadith mentions that while you are waiting for the salah, for the next salah to come, you are rewarded as if you are engaging in salah the entire time. So you're just sitting in the masjid over there for an hour and a half before the next salah comes in. Then it is written down in your book of good deeds that you were performing salah for 1.5 hours, despite the fact that you were just sitting there. So, وَانْتِظَارُ الصَّلَاةِ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ, for you to wait for the next salah after one salah has just ended. It is a means of Allah removing your sins and raising your ranks. And then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam ends it all off by saying, فَذَلِكُمُ الرِّبَاطِ, that is ribat. Now, ribat in the context primarily in the Sharia refers to a Muslim who's on the front lines guarding the Muslim lands. You are engaging in ribat, and ribat is one of the greatest of deeds together with jihad. So ribat, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about how when a normal person dies, your deeds come to an end except for sadaqah jariyah, ilmun yuntafa'u bihi, knowledge which you have taught people and people benefit from it, and waladun salihun yad'u lahu, a pious child who makes dua for you. You have all of those things mentioned in that hadith. But there's another hadith wherein Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the one who is in ribat and he dies in that state, then Allah has the deeds that he used to perform written down for him until the day of Qiyamah. So, he's got a sadaqah jariyah bank that was created for him on account of his ribat. So ribatu yawmin wa laylatin khayru mimma tala'at alayhi ash-shamsu aw taghruba, aw kama qala alayhi salatu wassalam, that spending a morning or an afternoon in jihad or in ribat, there's great rewards, greater than the world and all it contains. That's how great rewards has been associated with ribat. So that is ribat. But in the context here, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is not saying that these deeds are equivalent to that, but rather Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is saying that this is like ribat in the sense that the Muslim who's at the front line, you guard and protect the Muslims from any harm. So if you're in a position where the difficulties come and yet you make your wudu despite the difficulties, the difficulty in taking a lot of steps and traveling a long distance to a masjid, but you undergo it regardless and you travel to the masjid. And let's put it this way, time is the most precious of things because you can make money at any time, but time that is gone by is time that you will never get back. So the time that you spend waiting for the next salah after one salah, your intention is not because, I feel too lazy to go home now, let me just lay here anyway. It's not that type of thing. You are sitting in the masjid there because you are so eager for the next salah that you are sitting in the masjid waiting for the next one. So, when your mindset is in this fashion, then your body and everything is in a state of ribat against sins. So a person who's like this, forever eager, you just finish your Asr, you're waiting for Maghrib. You just finish your Maghrib, you're waiting for Isha. Your Isha is just finished, you're already thinking, I need to go and sleep early so I can get up for Tahajjud and Fajr. Your mind is fixated on the next Salah. When it comes to the point of the adhan goes 15 minutes before the Jama'ah Salah. So, before the time, it's going to take me half an hour to walk to the masjid. So I know I need to leave now. All of these things. When your mind is fixated on such things, your mind is not so easily swayed by sins and evil. So it is a form of ribat, linguistically, in the sense that it will protect you and preserve you from from falling into the traps of shaitan, where you get taken for a ride where sin and evil is concerned. So that is the type of ribat that is being referred to in this hadith. So Rawah Muslim, Imam Muslim rahimahullah is the narrator of that hadith. Our time is just about out, so let me just read one final hadith. السادسة عشرة, hadith number 132, the 16th hadith of the chapter. عن أبي موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من صلى البردين دخل الجنة. متفق عليه. البردان الصبح والعصر. Hazrat Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, whoever performs the two cold ones will enter Jannah. Muttafaqun alayhi, meaning it's reported both by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah. Al-Bardan, Bardain, same word, it changes according to its position in the sentence and what is affecting it, that you learn in the Arabic class again. But Al-Bardan, what is the one who performs the Bardan? The Bardan, two cold ones, refers to As-Subh, which means Fajr, and Asr. So whoever performs Fajr and Asr Salah will enter Jannah. You have to perform your Fajr, you have to perform your Asr, but yet Allah has attached such rewards to it that if you perform your Fajr and your Asr Salah on time properly, then Allah will enter you into Jannah simply on account of that. That's why I said Allah looks for excuses to forgive us. Allah looks for excuses to reward us, and we overlook it and think it as being unimportant. Now, why is Fajr and Asr referred to as Bardain? The reason is because the day in Islam, let's put it this way, day begins from through dawn. Subuh Sadiq, which is through dawn, which is when the time of Fajr begins. So Fajr is essentially in the day. And as you know, Fajr is a cold time in the day because the sun is not yet out. So even though we may currently be in summer here in South Africa right now, so it may be hot even Fajr time, but the point is that when the sun is out, Dhuhr time, that's when the sun is at its, just after its zenith, it's at its hottest. So it's a lot hotter than what it was Fajr time in the morning. So Fajr time is when the sun has not yet risen. So it's cool, it's a cool time. So it's the one cold. The beginning of the day starts in coolness. And Asr, the reason is because as the sun begins to set, the severity of the rays, the heat of the sun begins to wither. So therefore, your day begins from Subuh Sadiq, your day ends with the entrance of Maghrib. So three salahs are performed in the day, two salahs are performed at night. Fajr, Dhuhr, and Asr are performed in the day. Maghrib and Isha are performed at night. So if you perform your Fajr in the coolness, your Asr is thus performed in the coolness too, because by this time the sun has already lost its power. And that's why you find in a hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Abridu bi dhuhri fa innahu a'zamu lil ajr," or kama qala alayhi salatu wassalam, that abridu, barid, delay your dhuhr on the days when it is very hot. Abridu bi dhuhr, when it's very hot, delay your dhuhr until it becomes a little bit cooler, because there's more reward in that. So if you happen to be performing your salah in a country where it's currently summer and it's boiling hot and stuff, and you are performing, for example, you're a woman, you're performing salah at home, for example, then you can delay your dhuhr a little bit. If you are performing salah in jama'ah, for example, don't miss your jama'ah now for stuff of the sort. So because the jama'ah takes precedence over such things. But the reason is because when it's so hot and the sun is baking down on you, especially if you're performing salah on the outside, the floor is so hot, you feel like you're an egg that was just cracked, and you're cooking, you're frying there like a fried egg on the ground. So to save you from that, Allah even adds extra reward in such things, that by you delaying your salah, you're not performing your salah even at the first earliest time in the heat, you are delaying it for your benefit, and yet Allah puts extra reward in it for you as well. So whoever performs the Fajr and the Asr salah as a reward for it, Allah will enter him into Jannah. This will be the end for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. We only did a handful of ahadith, but at least we did something. So we'll stop on this point here for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. Next week, we will continue onwards from the 17th hadith number 133. But with that being said, we end on this point here for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. Until next time, we end and we say, وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ وَسَلَّمَ وَبَارَكَ عَلَى نَبِيِّنَا مُحَمَّدٍ سُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ سُبْحَانَكَ اللَّهُمَّ وَبِحَمْدِكَ نَشْهَدُ أَن لَّا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.